Alright guys, welcome back. We are on video number 8 of chapter 9, so the last one dealing with World War I and kind of the fallout afterwards. So, before we get to U.S. history, as always, the joke of the day. So I was doing a little bit of research last night and looked up something about French fries. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but the first fries were not cooked in France. They were cooked in Greece. So as always, pause it if you need to. Take it all in. But now let's get back to U.S. history. So last time we left off by talking about some negatives in U.S. after World War I. And it's kind of strange to think because after the war, everyone worked together. Everyone was trying to accomplish the goal of beating the Central Powers, more specifically beating the Germans. And the war is over. We won. Celebration. Everyone comes back. Yay. Woot woot. But there's negatives. And we talked about the treaty. We talked about how inflation is going to start to lead to more strikes, and that's not going to, make things better. And it's going to be quite some time before we start to cooperate and really get out of that time period where there's going to be a lot of tension. So the first thing to talk about today is going to be the racial unrest. So again, to take a step back and talk about World War I. There was something known as the Great Migration, which was started again by Henry Ford, who took his managers and told them to go to the South and try to recruit African Americans to move north and start and work in the factories. We talked about how women work in the factories. African Americans are going to start to take those roles as well. But the big issue is after World War I, when soldiers came home, they expected to have the same jobs that they had before. So a lot of women, unfortunately, again, they lost their jobs, and there was going to be a lot of racial tension between soldiers and African Americans who were working in those factories. So frustration and racism eventually is going to combine, and it's going to produce a lot of violence. And the violence is going to produce over 20 different race riots that are going to start in 1919. So of those, there's a couple notable ones. There was one that took place in Washington, D.C. that lasted over 3 days, and I'll tell you that the police really did not do much to try to stop this effort at all. After the first day, they called in a cavalry, a unit from the U.S. Army, but the cavalry that they brought in had been known to have segregation issues. They were actually charged with starting a riot over a water station. So, they brought in a group of people who probably weren't going to make the situation any better. So eventually, after 3 days, that riot is going to be broken up. But probably the most notable one was going to be in Chicago. And this took place on a very hot day. There's rumors that it was about 100 degrees, and people, they just wanted to relax. They wanted to cool down. So they went to a beach where this is all going to start. Now, there wasn't really, there wasn't supposed to be segregation in public areas in Chicago, especially at the beaches. But this is going to kind of start where an area that people thought it was an all-white beach, and there were African Americans that were there trying to cool down. Now, there was I think it was three teenagers. They were on a raft. They went out trying to cool off, and their raft slowly started to go towards that area where people thought it was an all-white beach. Now, because they were in this area and because segregation and tensions were very high, rocks were actually thrown at them, preventing them from coming ashore. And at first, the rumor is that they thought it was just a game, that they were kind of skipping rocks at each other. They were throwing them back. But eventually, one of them gets hit in the head, and they're going to drown. And that is when things definitely start to escalate, and people realize that it wasn't a game, and this rioting is going to start to take place. So, National Guard is going to be called in, but rioting goes on for 2 straight weeks in that city. People are killed all over the idea or the issue of segregation. So there's going to be a lot of racial unrest. There's also going to be something known as the Red Scare, which, I think you probably talked a little bit about last year in world history, but the idea of the Red Scare is going to be communism. And this kind of goes back to World War I and with the Russians. When they leave the war, a lot of people thought that the Russians were now going to join the Germans. They were now going to be part of the Central Powers. So because of that, the idea of being a communist leads to the idea of unpatriotic, and you're not going to be loyal. And with people who are coming in, immigration, and they were starting to have the idea of communism, there was going to be a scare. There was going to be a panic. And we're going to have 2 of these throughout U.S. history, but this is going to be the first one, known as the Red Scare. And what's going to happen is all of these different strikes that are taking place because of inflation, that is going to escalate the fear that communists are coming in and they're trying to completely undermine our government. Now, again, this was a panic. There was really no real truth behind this whatsoever. But because there were so many strikes, they were viewing it as starting a revolution. There were people who were starting to be fearful, and they were starting to panic that the United States was going to become a communist country. Now, there is also another group known as the Communist International who try to spread the worldwide fear of communism. They're trying to spread it to the United States. And I guess you could say they maybe started to pick up a little bit of steam because there were some communist organizations in the United States. And their message of spreading fear, or their motive, was they are going to try to send bombs through the mail. So the U.S. Postal Service, they did a very good job. They intercepted more than 30 parcels, so they intercepted more than 30 packages that were supposed to explode when opened. And here is going to be an example of one of the houses that unfortunately they did not catch. And the fear of communism, the fear of, I guess, really being taken over is going to start to become a little bit more widespread. So what are they going to do to combat that? They're going to do something known as the Palmer Raids. And the reason that these are going to be called the Palmer Raids is they are named after Abe Mitchell Palmer. Now, Abe Mitchell Palmer, he is the Attorney General. In case you don't know what the Attorney General is, they are essentially the lawyer for the government. Anytime there's a major dispute between the U.S. government and a foreign country or different states and things like that, it's going to be the Attorney General who is going to be fighting for that behalf on the U.S. government. And they're a cabinet member, which you'll talk more about next year in POD. But anyways, Abe Mitchell Palmer, why is he going to start this whole thing? One night, when he gets home from a party, and Abe Mitchell Palmer, he is very wealthy. He lives in a very, very influential, affluential neighborhood. And a communist is going to pick him to really kind of start this revolution. And when I say pick him, they are going to try to bomb his house. Now, they had been watching Palmer for quite some time. They knew where he was pretty much at most times of the day. And they knew where he was going to be at night. They knew that most of the time when he came home, he went and read in his parlor and then went to bed. So a communist ran up to the house, placed a bomb at the front door with the idea that Palmer was going to be in the parlor and it was going to explode and he was going to be killed. Now, Palmer went to bed right away. He was not actually in his parlor. And only one person is going to be killed. And I guess you could say it's almost like a little bit of karma, because the person that is killed is the one who is planting the bomb. There's kind of a theory, they don't know that this is actually true or not, but the thought is that he planted the bomb, tried to run away, tripped on it, had nitroglycerin in his pocket, and when he fell, it exploded on impact. But anyways, Abe Mitchell Palmer is now going to target the communists. He's now going to target the Red Scare, and he's going to create the General Intelligence Division. Now, this is something that still is going to be around today, but it goes by a different term. Today we call it the FBI. So because of the Red Scare, the FBI is going to be created, or the General Intelligence Division. It's going to be formed by J. Edgar Hoover, who is going to be the first person that's in charge of it. Now, he is going to lead raids against these radical organizations, and they are definitely going to punish individuals. They are going to do it based off of rumors. They don't necessarily always have to have the most information, but they are going to use brutal tactics. And what I mean by that is thousands of individuals who were suspected of being a communist, they are arrested, they are thrown in jail, and they are deported. All right. Today in America, and this is going to be the same thing back then, you are guaranteed to have a trial by jury. Abe Mitchell Palmer and the Palmer Raids, if you were suspected of it, out. They were going to be deported. So they're going to do that. They're also going to start to take away, again, civil liberties. We talked about this during World War I, how you didn't necessarily have unlimited freedom of speech, but civil liberties. They would enter people's homes. All right, today, police officers, if they want to enter your home, there has to be probable cause or a warrant. You know, that's the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure. But no, they could go into people's houses. They could throw people in jail. They would not let them speak to their lawyers, so they couldn't have any way to defend themselves. Now, today, if that happens, that would be all over the media. I mean, we hear and see the things that's talked about on the news today with certain things that government officials are doing, more specifically the president. Now, this would be under the jurisdiction of the president. You know, talking about chain of command. He's in charge of the executive branch. He's in charge of Attorney General. Attorney General is going to hire J. Edgar Hoover, so it's kind of going down another step. But back then, Palmer's a hero. He is the person who is having all these people arrested and having them deported. But according to American public, he's doing it in the eyes of safety. Therefore, he's a hero.